Welcome to the Breeder's Brew, the dog breeding podcast hosted by me, Isobel, the canine nutrition coach.
And me, Sarah, the canine family planner.
Together, we'll be promoting responsible breeding by unpicking the minefield of breeding myths and methods for owners wishing to expand their whelping wisdom. Well, hello, welcome back. I hope you haven't missed me too much in the last 24 hours. But hey, I feel like this window does go very quickly. I know a lot of us are back to work today, aren't we? It's finally 2026 and reality's hitting. It certainly is for me. My to-do list is ever growing. And it's quite scary, the pace at which this has come around. I feel like this Christmas has gone quicker than ever. I'm sure it probably feels the same for you as well. And my trip over the border into sunny Scotland disappeared in the blink of an eye. But I'm back anyway. I must say, I didn't partake in any haggis hunting while I've been gone. It's not my bag. I'm vegetarian, come on. However, I did get involved in many of the other Scottish traditions while I was away. It was my first ever Hogmanay celebration, from Cayley dancing to the Gay Gordons, and of course finishing the night with the Strip the Willow. I really enjoyed learning about how other cultures do things. After all, we all celebrate New Year's Eve, but I can honestly say the Scots might well do it best, because that was my first Hogmanay and probably the best New Year's Eve I've ever experienced. And it was all because I was willing to give something different a try. I had to leave my introvert, my self-consciousness, and potential social embarrassment at the door. However, that with a dram of whiskey, and I had the most fantastic evening. And just goes to show that actually finding out how other people do things might not just be incredibly good fun, but actually it can have a whole host of other benefits. It goes without saying that as dog owners, dog lovers, we all care for our dogs, we all keep them alive and thriving, but there'll be a million ways to do that. So a quick takeaway, don't forget, just because you've always done something a certain way, there might be better ways to do it. But anyway, I digress. On the note of traditions, of course, our New Year's Eve ended with yet another Scottish tradition, which was called the first footings. And traditionally, the first person to cross the threshold after midnight should ideally be a tall, dark-haired, generally male guest bearing symbolic gifts, albeit I'm not male, I have got dark hair, so I was very much an important part of this. However, we had forgotten that we were meant to be bringing the first footings gifts, so throughout our Hogmanay celebrations at the Cayley dance, we had to cobble together our gifts. So traditionally you would take something for your host to firstly provide warmth, which would have normally been coal, something for flavour, which would have usually been salt, something for cheer, which of course would have normally been whiskey, and finally some food to share, which should have been Scottish shortbreads. However, during our evening, there was no chance we were going to get hold of any of those things, so we had to cobble together what we could. We managed to get a candle for warmth, we got a sugar cube for flavour, we got a bottle of Corona from the bar, and finally, the only thing we could find to eat was a digestive cracker from my cheese course. But we did it. We crossed the threshold with all the gifts we should have done and blessed our host's house with some good luck for 2026. And then before we went to bed, we finished the night with the good old the Proclaimers, I'm Gonna Be, or 500 miles for those of you that don't know. And this morning I quite literally have done to get back to our beautiful southern England. Well, obviously I have not walked 500 miles. I couldn't have even walked 5. But I've sat on train, automobile, plane, add them all together, I'm back. And after this very long journey home, I've been greeted with a gift on my doorstep. What a lovely way to come back. My final Christmas present from Sarah has literally just turned up. I'm so excited because I thought that was all me done for presents, and I got this final little last one through the letterbox. It's put a proper smile on my face, and it is the most beautiful guided journal. Those of you that are in our world will know that myself and Sarah are big advocates of journaling, of reflecting, and most importantly taking notes and observations, because if you don't have a frame of reference in the past, it's really hard to look back and see your growth, see your progress, and also see what changes you have made or what you might need to make. So I genuinely feel she could not have got me a better present. This beautiful little book that is 2025 journal, where I'm having to break down what my reflections for the year have been. So very well timed. I'm so excited. I've literally jumped straight into it already. And I'm going to have my little journaling session every evening as a pre-sleep wind down routine that doesn't involve digital screens, because as we all know, no blue light and screens before bed are any goods for any of our sleep hygiene. So that is yet another one of my New Year's resolution, that I'm going to have no screens 1 hour before I go to sleep. So it's present. It's into that new habit that I'm trying to form. And I've gone through this journal, and it's unlike any journal I've had before. So this breaks down 2025 into key reflections. And I think we can all learn something and take away something from this. So let me read out the first page to you. A lot can change and a lot can happen in just 1 year. So now it's time to take a step back and reflect on what's happened in your life in 2025. Those 12 months will have been filled with celebrations, happiness, but also some sadness and challenges. And throughout it all, you will have learned valuable lessons that will have helped you to grow. So now, in the rest of this book, you'll be answering questions designed to help you reflect on all that has happened in your life in 2025, from the milestones to your happiest moments, to your hardest moments and everything in between. If at first you find it hard to recall things, take it slowly, go month by month, spend a little time pondering each question, and most importantly, you should enjoy the process of reflecting to spend quality time with yourself. I thought it was a lovely start, but really the importance of this is it goes through your highest and lowest points and gets to the bottom of why you were there. And also it gives you a frame of reference. So the first reflection point is, what was going on in your life this time last year? Where were you up to with your goals? Where were you up to with your life achievements? What were your major events and milestones of 2025? And what have you created, achieved and made happen 2025? And I think that's lovely to look at the positives, because actually we all achieved so much more than what we realise in a year. And to look back and feel that gratitude is a really important standpoint before we go into 2026. So I'm going to be going through all of those reflections, and along with the section on gratitude. So it's, what am I grateful for right now in life? What have I been grateful for? Who have I been grateful for? Now, the reason that we should reflect back on these things is the next section of this is all about how to design the dream 2026. And without having the reflections of what did go well for me in 2025, maybe what didn't go well for me in 2025, it can be really hard to then have a think, how do I want this year to look? So I'm going to be spending a lot of time really designing my 2026, because every day is a school day. I know I've had certain interactions with breeders this year from their lessons, and I want to make sure that I can give you guys even more of the information you need in 2026 to help you make better decisions. So a massive part of my dream 2026 will be recording more podcast episodes, being more present on social media, just so I can feel more connected to you and more engaged in this amazing community we've built, because I find that incredibly rewarding to be able to help people avoid dramas and the stressful side of breeding when it should be such a fantastic, beautiful process. So anyway, that's what I've been up to this afternoon, and I'll be chipping away at this journal to build my dream 2026. The reason I tell you guys this is because now is the most amazing time for you to take a step back, reflect on what has happened for you this year, what conversations have you had, and what do you want to take forwards with you in 2026? If you did have a litter in 2025, what could have gone better for you? Could mum have been in better condition? Or did she have a small litter? Did she have a perfect litter that couldn't have gone any better? If so, look at the protocol you had in place and make sure you write that down and you keep it safe so that you can follow that protocol again in the future. And if there are tweaks that need making, then now's the time to sort of sit and reflect on what those tweaks could be. And if it didn't go right, but you can't quite work out why and where you need to change your protocol, come and jump on into the private Facebook group, which is currently called the Breeders Brew Community. And feel free to ask us in there, and we'll be more than happy to have a chat with you. And another change that's well worth considering, that I know Sarah and I mentioned in another podcast episode, was all about improving your dog's diet, for example. It's been scientifically proven that an improvement in diet by 20%, more fresh, unultra-processed foods, will relate to a massive health boost. You can do that over the course of this year and you will see notable changes, notable differences. So there's so many little changes we can make that will set us all up so much better for 2026. I will also be doing that myself. So challenge you guys, look back and reflect. So actually, I have gone through my journal, and one of the boxes I had to fill in was, what was one conversation that really made you think this year? And the one that sprung to mind, which I will share with you guys now, was when I was actually guest lecturing on canine nutrition for a group of about 60 students, and their course leaders were in the room, and they all had industry experience, one of which had been a practice manager at a vet's for over 30 years, and the other two had actually been vet nurses and had moved into education following their career in vet nursing. And I had the most interesting conversation with them midway through. So the lecture I gave was all to do with why a dog needs the diet that a dog does. So where did a dog come from? Well, our dogs actually came from an ancient ancestor of the grey wolf that we know today. So they're almost like distant cousins of the wolves that we know in the wild. So with that being said, we then built up the foundations of, well, if we know what a wolf eats in the wild and our dogs are a cousin, distant cousin, what can we take from that? What inferred knowledge can we apply? And that is that obviously wolves can't go and make ultra processed food, essentially. They're eating fresh, natural, healthy ingredients on a balanced daily basis. So that formed the foundations of our lecture. I then set my students up with a task. Each group had a very different dog food, and they went through a set of questions and tried to work out whether or not this was actually a good food for the modern day dog. The course leaders were actually really keen to get involved, so they sat down and started working on one of the tasks as well, which prompted the conversation. And I was aware that with the background that they had in veterinary nursing, they might have been quite polarised in their views, and more importantly, they may not see eye to eye with the teachings that I was offering to their students. I was aware that one of the course leaders that had been in practice for a very long time was not necessarily on board with my views on feeding. And with that in mind, I was well braced for the conversation when it appeared, which was, Isobel, so do you tell everyone to raw feed? What is going to be the outcome of this lesson? What are you going to be telling my students? So from that lead in, I thought, right, this is going to be an interesting conversation. Based on her background, I wonder if she might be more pro-kibble than pro-raw, and whether she may have concerns around raw feeding, whether that be down to the balanced nature of the diet or bacterial or contamination risks. So we dived into the conversation. I gave her my views on raw feeding, which was it can be brilliant, but it doesn't suit everyone. And my teaching is always tailored to the owner and their lifestyle and their dog. Essentially, I apply something that we actually call the 3B lens. Now, the 3B lens is something that we teach inside the support club. The 3Bs stand for breed, brain, and background. And essentially what that means is every time we are helping people, whether that's through canine nutrition coach, support club, or anything else in between, because there is no point in me giving advice to somebody that owns a Labrador breed, a closed mindset, brain, and a background which means that they've always kibble fed and will never touch raw food. There would be no point me saying to them, you should really give raw feeding a go. It's going to revolutionise your dog's life, because they're not going to take on board that guidance and that information, and I'm not going to be able to help them. So you absolutely have to have a tailored approach, because if that person had a completely different breed, background and brain, then I could be giving different advice. However, if that person had a miniature dachshund that had an open learner's mindset, brain, and a background that meant they were more novice to dog owning and therefore a little bit more willing to accept advice, the advice I give might be completely different. And it's no different when we come on to breeding topics as well. So it was fascinating to me as I put on my 3B hat, ready to give her an explanation as to why my teachings are different with everyone I sit down with. She stopped me in my tracks and said, I've worked in veterinary care, don't you? I said, yep. Yeah, I do. I appreciate your years of experience and dedication, and I'm aware that we are likely to have different views, especially as a couple of the brands of dog food I had set out in the room for the students to do their task on. We had Hill Science Plan, we had Purina, we had Royal Canin. and a few other really big players in the room, so that the students could really get to the bottom of the labels, understanding what was in the food and everything else. For those of you that have a vet practice that is large, quite corporate vet practice, you'll probably see that they have a shop inside, and the likelihood is that they will sell potentially Royal Canons, Hill Science Plan, or something like that. So I was full ready for the conversation to take that turn of, oh, well, actually, we recommend this. What really surprised me was her saying, yes, the whole time I was in practice, we recommended wholeheartedly that people should feed these big players in kibble. Then she proceeded to say, before I could jump in, however, since leaving vet nursing and doing my own research and becoming a dog owner, I am shocked, absolutely shocked at what our not only educational background taught us, but also what we're encouraged to advise in a professional stance. And she said, I don't touch half of the brands that I used to recommend to people anymore. I don't kibble feed. I fresh feed my dog. And I bet you're really surprised, aren't you? And I was really surprised. However, it just goes to show that having an open mindset is so powerful. And just because she had been a head vet nurse for decades, very well respected, helped countless animals and owners over that time, that even after being in industry for that long, she knew that every day was a school day. She took time to stop, reflect, do some further research. Don't just take, because this is the way we've always done it, as gospel. She's gone on, educated herself, and uncovered truths that she otherwise never would have done. And her dogs are now thriving, all because of the hard work that she put in and the fact that she had this open mindset, open brain, to explore what other options there were for her dogs. Obviously, this has all been around feeding, and I appreciate a lot of you guys are breeding, and that's why you're listening. But the same applies. It doesn't matter what area of a dog's lifestyle you are looking at taking information from. It just shows that actually we all can learn, and opinions and ideas don't have to be fixed. So often people will say, well, I've done this for 30 years and this is the way that my mum did it. I've never had a scan. I've never needed a scan. I've never scanned any of my females, so I'm not scanning. Scans don't work. Well, actually, the worst thing you can do is have a fixed mindset when it comes to breeding, because we need to keep our finger on the pulse when it comes to new science, new studies, new information, so that we can actually be at the forefront and be allowing our dogs to benefit from this research and benefit from these advances in the industry. Because it's all well and good saying that, well, this has worked for me for the last 30 years. But do you know what? There's a lot of things we did. Smoking, great example. People smoked for decades before we found out it wasn't any good for us. And a lot of people were absolutely fine despite smoking for decades. Whilst unfortunately, there's those of us that have lost people in our family to lung cancer due to smoking. So it just goes to show that actually no opinion should be fixed. I challenge you to challenge yourself. And if you do have views, why are those views what they are? Maybe look and see if there has been more current research about the specific type of food that you're feeding, or the specific type of mating method you tend to opt for. Maybe there would be better options for your female. Or actually, you do a certain type of prenatal supplement, but are there better ones or different ones that you could or should be adding in? How do you wean your puppies? Just because you've always weaned onto puppy mousse, for example, because it's convenient and the puppies enjoy it, is it the best thing for those puppies to be weaned onto? There's so many parts of dog ownership that we have to think about that sometimes it's easier just to carry on as the way we always have. But the new year is a great time for new starts. And I know that being challenged does feel uncomfortable. And it certainly did for me in that split moment when I thought, I'm in front of a room full of our brightest future minds and their course leaders about to be challenged. And it can feel nerve-wracking. However, it just goes to show that sharing your opinions with others is actually a really beneficial experience, because you might find either more people agree with you than you think, or actually if they don't agree with you, why don't they agree with you? Is there space for you both to learn? Is it the fact that actually someone's views might be outdated or closed mindset? There's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to breeding, and this is the whole reason why we always teach the 3B lens. And I think this specific example in my year was particularly pivotal because I felt the 3B lens come to life in that moment, in real life, in that real conversation. But actually, it's so important to apply it to yourself as well, because if you have got a closed mindset, or you have got a breed that has got breed quirks, you have got to acknowledge other people might deal with their breed in a completely different way. For example, there are some breeds that would never do elective C-section, whereas you've got other where that's considered standard. On the other hand, you've got some breeds that are notoriously late ovulators, so they'll say, no, you would never need to start progesterone testing until day 11, whereas you've got some breeds that tend to be quirky and you'd start testing on day 6 of season. And actually, because your background has been in something very different, for example, in veterinary medicine, you're going to have a completely different set of experiences and views to somebody that hasn't experienced those things. So it's really important to remember you can't just take advice from anyone. So I think we all need to pop on our 3B lens a little bit more often and make sure that either the advice we're giving to people is tailored, or at least they're aware that you might have a slightly polarized view. And also, when we're listening to others, are they giving their advice to me through a 3B lens? And actually, what breed do they have? What brain do they have? What background do they have? So it was really lovely seeing such a core foundation to everything that we do come to life in that moment. And if you would like to learn more about the 3B lens and why it's so important, and actually how you can then use that to identify who should be in your inner circle when it comes to breeding, then I encourage you to jump into our support club, because we have an entire deep dive masterclass spotlight session on the 3B lens and actually how to find your dream team by using that. So if you haven't already yet, we do have a special gift at the moment, which is the code for 50% off your first month in the support club, which is BIRDS246. And that expires on the 12th night of Christmas. Just head over to whelpingworld.com/support club. So I hope you've enjoyed a bit of an inside look in my brain. Today's episode's been a different one, but I'm feeling very reflective at the moment, and hopefully you can take the opportunity to do so as well, because there's no time like the present to look back, look into the future, and start planning for what you want your dream life to look like with your dogs and your puppies. Every day is a school day. Keep that brain nice and open, and just remember that opinions should never be fixed. Always challenge yourself, challenge others, and stay up to date where you can. Apply the current research for the benefit of yours and your dog's lives. All right, I'm going to leave you to it. Have a lovely rest of your day. Enjoy whatever festivities you're up to, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye for now.